Chapter 1, The Encounter. Have you ever met someone who changed the course of your life in an instant, without even realizing it? On a chilly autumn evening, the streets of downtown Boston were bustling with people. Some hurried past with their heads down, clutching their coats tighter against the cold wind, while others were lost in conversation or glued to their phones. Amid the flow of city life, an old man named Sam Richardson sat quietly on a bench near the Boston Common. His weathered face, framed by a graying beard, told 1,000 stories of hardship, resilience, and survival. Sam was a homeless veteran, a man who had seen and experienced more than most could imagine. He'd spent years moving from shelter to shelter, trying to make sense of a world that had seemingly forgotten him, but Sam had a kind heart, and even after everything he'd been through, losing friends in battle, coming back to a country that didn't seem to care, and falling into the endless cycle of homelessness, he never lost his sense of humanity. As he sat on the bench, he watched the world go by, his eyes always searching for the one thing that gave him hope, the kindness of strangers. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cobblestone paths, Sam noticed a small figure standing alone by a tree. The child, a little girl no older than 8, seemed out of place in the bustling crowd. She was wearing a bright red coat, her dark curly hair partially covering her worried face. She kept turning in circles, her eyes darting around as if searching for someone. "Where's your mommy, little one?" Sam thought to himself. He'd seen this scene before, lost children in a big city, overwhelmed by the noise and the people. Sam could tell by her frantic movements that she was scared. Without a second thought, he stood up, his old joints creaking in protest, and walked over to her. "Hey there, little lady," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "Are you lost?" The girl looked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with tears. "I can't find my mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. It's all right," Sam reassured her, holding out his hand. "We'll find her. You just gotta stay calm, okay?" She hesitated for a moment, staring at his rough, calloused hand. Sam was used to this, his appearance often caused people to keep their distance. But he patiently waited, and after a few moments, the girl placed her tiny hand in his. "My name's Sam." "What's yours?" "Amelia," she replied softly. "All right, Amelia. Let's see if we can find your mom. Do you remember where you saw her last?" Amelia nodded and pointed toward a busy intersection. Sam guided her through the crowd, his protective presence helping to calm her nerves. As they walked, he kept an eye out for anyone who might look like they were searching for a child. He tried to keep Amelia talking, asking her about her favorite toys, her school, anything to keep her mind off the fear creeping into her voice. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the intersection, and there, near a newsstand, was a frantic woman looking around desperately. When she saw Amelia, her face lit up with a mixture of relief and tears. "Amelia," she cried, rushing over and scooping the girl into her arms. "Where were you? I was so scared." Amelia hugged her mother tightly. "I got lost, Mommy. But this nice man helped me." The woman looked at Sam, her eyes welling with gratitude. Thank you so much," she said, reaching out to shake his hand. Sam smiled, tipping his worn cap. "Just glad I could help, ma'am. You two take care now." As he turned to leave, he heard the woman call out, "Wait. Is there anything we can do to thank you?" Sam paused for a moment, but then shook his head. "No, ma'am, just knowing she's safe is thanks enough." And with that, he walked back to his bench, content to blend back into the shadows of the city. Little did Sam know that his small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Chapter 2, The Secret Meeting. 2 days later, as Sam was huddled under an old blanket in his usual spot near the park, a young man in a neatly pressed suit approached him. Sam's initial instinct was to ignore him. He had learned over the years that men in suits rarely brought good news. But the man stopped in front of him, his expression earnest and somewhat nervous. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Samuel Richardson?" Sam looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Who's asking?" "My name is Daniel Harris. I work for the mayor's office. I'm here to invite you to a meeting at City Hall. It's about something important." Sam blinked, confused. "City Hall? What would they want with me?" Daniel took a deep breath. "It's a private meeting, sir. The mayor wishes to speak with you personally. She heard about what you did for that little girl, Amelia, and, well, it's better if you hear it directly from her. Sam sat there, stunned. In all his years on the streets, he'd never been invited to City Hall, let alone by the mayor herself. He studied the young man's face, searching for any sign of deceit, but found none. His curiosity piqued. Sam nodded slowly. "All right, I'll come. But I'm not making any promises." Daniel smiled, relieved. "Thank you, sir. I'll arrange for a car to pick you up tomorrow morning. Is that all right?" Sam nodded again, and as Daniel walked away, he couldn't help but wonder what this was all about. Why would the mayor want to meet him? And what did it have to do with Amelia? That night, he barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, as promised, a sleek black car pulled up to the park. Sam, feeling out of place but determined to find out what was going on, got in. The ride to City Hall was quiet, with Daniel making polite conversation to ease the tension. When they arrived, Sam was led through the grand marble halls, past curious eyes and whispered conversations. He felt like a fish out of water, but he kept his head high, reminding himself that he'd faced worse than this. Finally, they reached a large oak door. Daniel knocked and then opened it, gesturing for Sam to enter. Inside, the room was filled with several important-looking people, including the mayor, a woman in her mid-50s with a sharp gaze and a warm smile. "Mr. Richardson," she said, standing up and extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Sam took a seat, still wary. "Why am I here, Mayor?" The mayor's smile widened. "Straight to the point. I like that. You're here because we need your help." Sam raised an eyebrow. "My help? With what?" The mayor leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "The story of how you helped little Amelia has spread throughout the community. It's a story of kindness, of a man who, despite his own struggles, helped a child in need. And it's exactly the kind of story this city needs right now. We have a problem, Mr. Richardson, one that requires someone who understands the streets, someone people trust. And I believe you might be the man for the job." Sam listened intently, his curiosity growing. What problem could they possibly need him for? And what kind of job was she talking about? As he sat there, waiting for her to explain, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to take a turn he never could have imagined. Chapter 3, The Proposal. The mayor explained that a series of incidents had been happening around the city, children going missing, only to reappear days later, confused and scared, but unharmed. The police were at a loss, and the community was growing more fearful with each passing day. They needed someone who could move through the city without drawing attention, someone who knew the ins and outs of the streets, and who could gain the trust of those who might know more. "We want you to be our eyes and ears on the ground, Mr. Richardson," the mayor said. "We believe that with your background, both as a veteran and as someone who's lived on these streets, you can help us get to the bottom of this." Sam sat back, taking it all in. This was no ordinary request. He'd gone from a homeless veteran to being asked to help solve a mystery that had the whole city on edge. Part of him wanted to say no, to walk away and return to the quiet anonymity of his bench. But another part of him, the part that had always longed to make a difference, to prove that he was still worth something, was intrigued. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady. "But on one condition." The mayor nodded. "Name it." "I want to know everything, every detail, every lead, and I want to be able to do this my way. No interference from the police or anyone else." The mayor smiled. "Agreed. Welcome to the team, Mr. Richardson." And with that, Sam Richardson, the homeless veteran who had helped a lost child, found himself at the center of a mystery that would change the city forever. Chapter 4, Into the Shadows. Sam's first few days on the job were overwhelming. The city's underbelly was filled with rumors, shadows, and secrets. He started by visiting places where the missing children had last been seen, abandoned lots, alleyways, and underpasses that served as makeshift playgrounds for kids with nowhere else to go. He learned that the children were disappearing near places where homeless people often gathered. This realization struck a chord with him. He knew these places well. It wasn't long before he began to sense that he was being followed. His instincts, honed from years of surviving on the streets, told him that he was onto something. One night, while investigating an old warehouse known for housing drifters, Sam overheard a conversation between two men. He hid behind a stack of crates, his ears straining to catch every word. "Another one tomorrow night. The boss says to keep it quiet, one man whispered. Where? The other asked, his voice hushed. The old docks. Midnight. Sam felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, a lead. He needed to get to those docks, but he'd have to be careful. Whoever was behind this was dangerous, and he wasn't about to walk into a trap. Chapter 5, The Ambush. The following night, Sam made his way to the docks, staying in the shadows, his footsteps silent against the cold, damp ground. He found a hiding spot with a clear view of the area and waited. The minutes ticked by slowly, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the pier. Then, he saw them, a group of men, all dressed in dark clothing, guiding a small, frightened child toward a waiting van. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. He had to act, but he couldn't do it alone. Just as he was about to step forward, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. He turned, ready to fight, but stopped when he saw who it was. Daniel Harris, the young man from the mayor's office. What the hell are you doing here? Sam hissed. Saving your life, Daniel whispered back. We know about the docks. You're not the only one working this case. Sam was about to argue when he noticed a group of uniformed police officers moving in from the other side. Within moments, the area erupted in chaos, shouting, the screech of tires, and the blinding flash of flashlights. The men in dark clothing scattered, some diving into the water, others trying to fight their way out. But they were quickly overwhelmed and subdued. One of the men caught in the chaos looked directly at Sam, his eyes narrowing with recognition. You, he spat. This is your doing. Before Sam could respond, the man was tackled to the ground by an officer. The adrenaline surged through Sam as he watched the scene unfold. The child, terrified but unharmed, was quickly taken to safety. Chapter 6, A New Beginning. Back at City Hall, the mayor and her team congratulated Sam and the officers on a successful operation. The child was reunited with her family, and the men were taken into custody, their network slowly being unraveled by investigators. Sam, however, remained unsettled. There's more to this, he told the mayor. Those men were just the pawns. Someone else is pulling the strings. The mayor nodded. We suspected as much. That's why we need you to continue. This was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Sam worked tirelessly, becoming a vital part of the city's efforts to dismantle the network behind the kidnappings. His street smarts and ability to connect with people who wouldn't talk to the police proved invaluable. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place, revealing a complex web of corruption, greed, and exploitation. But through it all, Sam found something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. The streets that had once been his prison were now his battleground, and he was determined to see this fight through to the end. As he stood on the steps of City Hall one evening, watching the sun set over the skyline, he realized that his life had come full circle. He'd gone from a man lost and forgotten to someone who could make a difference, not just for himself, but for an entire city. And in that moment, Samuel Richardson knew he'd finally found his way home. Chapter 7, Unraveling the Mystery. In the days following the operation at the docks, Sam became more deeply embedded in the undercurrents of the city than he ever had been before. The mayor's team provided him with resources, a small stipend, a burner phone, and a contact within the police department. He was officially their unofficial man on the streets, tasked with gathering intelligence that no one else could. Sam began his new mission with an exhaustive investigation, starting with the men they had apprehended. Most were low-level thugs who knew little about the broader operation. But one, a middle-aged man named Victor Reyes, had connections to a local business tycoon, Julian Kane. Kane, known for his philanthropic efforts, had a sterling public reputation. He was a donor to several children's charities and even had a wing of the local hospital named after him. But Sam, with his seasoned intuition, sensed that Kane was more than met the eye. I need to get close to him, Sam told Daniel during a late-night meeting in a rundown diner. I need to understand who this man really is and what he's hiding. Daniel nodded. Kane's hosting a gala next week, a fundraiser. I can get you in as staff, but you'll have to keep a low profile. Sam smirked. Low profile is my specialty. The plan was set. Over the next few days, Sam prepared himself for his new role as a waiter at Julian Kane's gala, studying floor plans, potential escape routes, and, most importantly, the guest list. Among the names, he found several people connected to the city's power structure, council members, police commissioners, business moguls. It was a who's who of influence, and Sam knew that if Kane was involved in something illicit, this was where he would find clues. Chapter 8, the Galath night of the gala was one of glitz and glamour. The city's elite arrived in black limousines, stepping out onto the red carpet in designer suits and glittering gowns. Inside the grand ballroom, chandeliers sparkled, and soft classical music played in the background. Sam, dressed in a simple black uniform, moved among the guests, serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres, all the while keeping his ears open for anything useful. It wasn't long before he spotted Julian Kane. Tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, Kane moved through the room with the ease of someone who owned it. He shook hands, laughed at jokes, and made small talk with politicians and celebrities alike. Sam watched him closely, trying to discern any crack in the facade. But Kane was good, too good. As Sam was refilling a glass, he overheard a snippet of conversation between Kane and a younger man, someone who looked like a junior executive. "Everything is on schedule," the young man whispered. "The next shipment is arriving tomorrow night." Kane nodded, his face betraying no emotion. "Good. Make sure there are no mistakes this time. I don't want any loose ends." Sam's pulse quickened. This was it, a lead. He discreetly moved closer, hoping to hear more, but the conversation ended as quickly as it began. Kane turned away, his smile back in place as he greeted another guest. For the rest of the evening, Sam continued to watch Kane, but he didn't hear anything else of value. As the gala wound down, Sam slipped out the back, his mind racing. The mention of a shipment and no loose ends suggested something far more sinister than he'd anticipated. He needed to find out what was arriving and where. Chapter 9, Into the Lion's Den. The next night, Sam found himself back at the docks, the same location as before, but this time with a plan. Daniel had managed to get him some basic surveillance equipment, a small camera and a voice recorder. He hid them in his coat as he moved through the shadows, careful not to draw attention to himself. Around midnight, a black SUV pulled up, followed by a truck with no markings. Sam watched from a distance as several men, including Victor Reyes, got out of the vehicles. They opened the back of the truck, revealing a group of frightened children, all around the same age as Amelia. Sam's heart sank, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had to get evidence, something concrete that could take down Kane and his network. As the men began herding the children toward a warehouse, Sam took a deep breath and moved in closer, positioning himself near a stack of crates. He raised his camera, capturing the scene. His hands were steady, his mind focused. He couldn't afford any mistakes. Suddenly, a flashlight beam swung in his direction. Sam ducked, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd been spotted. He could hear footsteps approaching, and he knew he had to move. He slipped around the back of the crates, trying to stay one step ahead of his pursuers. But the footsteps kept getting closer. Sam's mind raced. He needed to get out, but he also needed the footage. As he debated his next move, he spotted a ladder leading up to a catwalk above. Without hesitation, he climbed up, his old joints protesting with each step. From his new vantage point, he could see the entire operation below. He hit the record button on the camera and captured everything, the men, the children, and the faces of those involved. Then he heard a voice from below. "Come out, old man. We know you're up there." Sam's eyes widened. He recognized that voice. It was Victor Reyes. Chapter 10, The Chase. Sam knew he was running out of time. He stuffed the camera back into his coat and carefully moved along the catwalk, trying to stay out of sight. Below, Reyes and his men spread out, searching for him. Sam's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to think clearly. He spotted a fire escape on the other side of the warehouse and made his way toward it. Just as he reached the ladder, a loud noise echoed through the warehouse. One of the men had knocked over a pile of metal barrels, drawing attention away from Sam for a split second. It was all the opportunity he needed. Sam climbed down the fire escape and landed quietly on the ground below. He moved quickly, staying low and using the shadows for cover. As he neared the edge of the warehouse property, he heard shouting behind him, "There he is. Stop him." Sam broke into a sprint, his years of military training kicking in. He darted between buildings, down narrow alleys, and across empty lots, with the sound of footsteps and angry voices close behind. His breath came in sharp bursts, and his legs burned with every step, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. After what felt like an eternity, Sam spotted a familiar landmark, a small convenience store he knew well. He burst through the door, startling the clerk behind the counter. "Back room," Sam gasped, not slowing down. The clerk, recognizing him, nodded and motioned for him to go through. Sam slipped into the back room and found the exit, pushing out into a narrow alley. He kept running, not stopping until he reached a small, abandoned church he sometimes used as a safe house. There, finally, he allowed himself to catch his breath. He pulled out the camera, checking the footage. It was all there, the proof he needed. Chapter 11, The Revelation. The next day, Sam met Daniel in a secluded park, far from prying eyes. He handed over the camera and the recorder, his face grim. "This is it," Sam said. "Everything we need to take down Cain and his whole operation." Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "I'll get this to the mayor and the police. We'll need to move quickly. Cain has connections everywhere, and if he gets wind of this, he'll disappear." For the next few days, the city was a flurry of activity. The footage and audio recordings were damning, and warrants were issued for the arrest of Julian Cain and his associates. The media went into a frenzy as details emerged, and the public, once enamored with Cain's philanthropy, turned against him, but Cain wasn't going down without a fight. Using his wealth and influence, he tried to flee the country, but the police, tipped off by Sam's information, caught him at a private airfield just outside the city. As the news broke, Sam watched from a distance, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. He had done it. He had helped bring down a powerful man and saved countless children from a life of misery. But there was still more work to be done. Chapter 12, A New Purpose. With Cain behind bars and his network dismantled, Sam found himself at a crossroads. The mayor offered him a permanent position within a new task force dedicated to protecting the city's most vulnerable. But Sam, ever the independent spirit, had his own ideas. "I appreciate the offer, Mayor," he said during a private meeting in her office. "But I've spent too long on these streets to leave them now. I want to keep doing what I'm doing, but on my own terms." The mayor smiled, understanding. "Very well, Sam. Consider yourself an honorary member of our team. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Sam nodded, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years. He knew he could make a difference, not just as part of the system, but as a free agent, moving through the shadows where he was needed most. Over the next few months, Sam became a quiet legend in the city. Word spread of the homeless man who had taken on a criminal empire and won. People began to trust him, and his network of informants grew. He continued to work with the mayor and her team, but he did it on his own terms, always staying true to his principles. He helped reunite lost children with their families, exposed corrupt officials, and became a voice for those who had none. In a world filled with darkness, Sam Richardson was a beacon of hope, proving that one man, no matter how broken, could make a difference. And as he walked the streets at night, his eyes always searching for those in need, he knew that his journey was far from over. The city was his home, and he would protect it, no matter the cost. Chapter 13, The Silent Hero. The months following the takedown of Julian Cain were a whirlwind of activity and change for the city. Sam Richardson, once a forgotten soul among the thousands who roamed the streets, had become an unsung hero. The media occasionally tried to catch a glimpse of him, eager to plaster his face across newspapers and television screens. But Sam remained elusive, avoiding the spotlight. He preferred it that way. Fame wasn't his goal, he had work to do. With Cain's network dismantled, new threats emerged. Crime had a way of filling voids left behind by others, and the streets were never truly quiet for long. Sam was well aware of this truth. He kept his ears to the ground, listening to whispers in alleyways, shelters, and late-night diners. It wasn't long before he picked up on a new name, a shadowy figure known only as the broker. The broker was rumored to be a master manipulator who dealt in information, a puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows. No one seemed to know who they were or what they looked like, only that they were always one step ahead. Some said the broker had been working with Cain all along, and with Cain gone, they were setting the stage for something bigger, more dangerous. Chapter 14, A New Game begins. Sam's first lead on the broker came from a street artist named Lenny, who had a knack for hearing things most people didn't. Lenny had seen men in expensive suits meeting near an old church in South Boston, exchanging thick envelopes under the cover of night. "Word is, they're planning something big," Lenny told Sam one cold evening, his breath fogging in the chill air. "Heard them talking about shipments, guns, drugs, maybe worse. But they mentioned someone, the broker. Seems like they're scared of him." Sam's eyes narrowed. You hear anything about where these meetings are happening next? Lenny nodded. Tomorrow night. Same place, around 2 a.m. Sam thanked Lenny and slipped him a few bills for a hot meal. He knew Lenny wouldn't steer him wrong, the kid had good instincts. As Sam walked away, he formulated a plan. If the broker's men were meeting again, he needed to be there. The following night, Sam arrived at the church early. He knew the place well, an old, abandoned building with shattered stained glass and a bell tower that had long since fallen silent. He found a hiding spot in the shadows of the bell tower's remains, where he could see everything below without being seen himself. Just after 2 a.m., a black sedan pulled up, followed by a sleek motorcycle. Two men stepped out of the car, both wearing dark suits, their expressions tense. The man on the motorcycle dismounted, dressed similarly but with a more rugged look. Sam recognized him, Ricky "Knuckles" Marlowe, a notorious enforcer with a reputation for leaving bodies behind. They met near the entrance to the church, speaking in hushed tones. Sam strained to hear their conversation, but the wind made it difficult to catch every word. What he did hear, however, was enough to make his blood run cold. Shipments coming in next week, Ricky was saying. But the broker wants a demonstration first. We can't afford any screw-ups. One of the suited men nodded. What about Richardson? Word is he's been snooping around. The broker's not happy about that. Sam's heart skipped a beat. So they knew he was onto them. This wasn't just about stopping a shipment, it was about surviving. He carefully pulled out his recorder, capturing their conversation. The broker wanted a demonstration, a show of power, perhaps, to intimidate anyone thinking of crossing them. He needed to warn the mayor and Daniel. Whatever was coming, it was going to be big. Chapter 15. A step ahead. The next morning, Sam met Daniel in their usual diner. The young aide looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, a sign of the stress that had been building as they continued their covert war against the city's criminal underworld. They know about me, Sam said without preamble, sliding the recorder across the table to Daniel. And they're planning something big. A shipment next week, but they didn't say where. We need to find out more. Daniel listened to the recording, his face growing more serious with every word. This is bad, Sam. If the broker is planning something, it's going to be a mess. We need to get ahead of this. Agreed, Sam replied. We need to flush them out, make them show their hand. Daniel nodded. I'll talk to the mayor. We'll set up some surveillance near the docks and the old warehouses. If they're moving something, we'll find it. But Sam knew surveillance alone wouldn't be enough. The broker was too smart, too careful. They needed leverage, something to make the broker feel exposed, vulnerable. And Sam had an idea of how to get it. Chapter 16, a dangerous gambit. The following days were a blur of activity. Sam called in favors from his network of informants, gathering every scrap of information he could about the broker's operations. He pieced together a map of suspected hideouts, safe houses, and meeting spots. It wasn't perfect, but it gave him a start. Sam decided to take a bold approach. He needed to make himself visible, to draw the broker out of the shadows. He began showing up in places he knew the broker's people frequented, bars, underground clubs, and abandoned buildings. He asked questions, made his presence known, and let it slip that he was looking for the broker. It didn't take long for word to reach the right ears. One evening, as Sam sat in a dingy bar nursing a drink, a man slid into the seat next to him. He was tall, lean, with a face that looked like it had seen too many fights. You Richardson? The man asked, his voice low and rough. Sam didn't flinch. Depends who's asking. The broker wants a word. Sam's eyes narrowed. Where and when? Tomorrow. Midnight. Old factory on East End. Come alone. And just like that, the trap was set. But whose trap it was, Sam couldn't be sure. Chapter 17. Face to face with the broker. The old factory on East End was a relic of the city's industrial past, a sprawling, decaying building that had long since fallen into ruin. Sam arrived early, scoping out the area from a distance. The place was perfect for an ambush, multiple entrances, plenty of hiding spots, and no shortage of places to dump a body. Sam slipped inside, moving quietly through the shadows. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something was about to happen. As he reached the center of the factory floor, he saw them, a group of 5 men, all heavily armed. And in the middle of them, a figure dressed in a dark, tailored coat, their face obscured by the shadows. "So, you're the famous Sam Richardson," the figure said, their voice calm and measured. "I've been expecting you." Sam kept his hands at his sides, ready to move if he had to. "And you must be the broker. You wanted to talk. So, talk." The broker stepped forward, just enough for Sam to see their face. It was a woman, surprisingly young, with cold, calculating eyes. She smiled, a smile that didn't reach those eyes. "I wanted to see the man who's been causing me so much trouble," she said. "You've been quite the thorn in my side, Mr. Richardson." "Funny," Sam replied. "I was thinking the same thing about you." The broker's smile widened. "You're brave, I'll give you that. But bravery can only get you so far. You see, this city is mine, and you're just a relic of a past that doesn't matter anymore." Sam chuckled softly. "You think I'm a relic? Lady, you've got no idea what I'm capable of." The broker's eyes flashed with annoyance. "You're in over your head, old man. This is your last chance to walk away. Stay out of my business, and I might just let you live." Sam squared his shoulders. "Not a chance." The broker sighed. "Pity." She raised her hand, signaling her men. The sound of guns cocking filled the air, and Sam knew he was out of time. Chapter 18, The Battle at the Factory. Just as the broker's men raised their weapons, a series of loud bangs echoed through the factory. Smoke grenades exploded on the floor, filling the room with thick, choking smoke. Sam dropped to the ground, rolling behind a pile of rusted machinery for cover. He heard shouting, gunfire, and the unmistakable sound of boots rushing in from all sides. Daniel's voice crackled through a hidden earpiece Sam was wearing. "We've got you covered, Sam. Hold on." Sam took advantage of the chaos, moving quickly through the smoke. He knew he had to take out the broker, or this would never end. He could see shadows moving in the fog, hear the sounds of combat all around him. He spotted the broker slipping through a side door, her bodyguards falling back to cover her escape. Sam pushed himself up, sprinting after her. He wasn't about to let her slip away. They burst out onto the roof of the factory, the cold night air hitting Sam like a wall. The broker was already halfway across, heading for a fire escape. Sam charged forward, grabbing her just as she reached the edge. "Not so fast," he growled, pinning her against the railing. The broker sneered, her confidence shattered. "You think this changes anything? You think you've won?" Sam tightened his grip. "No, but I'm damn sure you've lost." The broker struggled, but Sam held her firm until the police swarmed the roof, taking her into custody. Chapter 19, A New Dawn. With the broker in custody and her network exposed, the city finally began to breathe a little easier. The mayor called it a turning point, a moment when the city stood up to its darkest elements and said, "No more." Sam, however, knew the fight wasn't over. There were always more shadows, more threats lurking just out of sight. But for now, the city had a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to become something better. He continued his work, roaming the streets, listening to the whispers, and helping those who couldn't help themselves. The city might never truly be safe, but as long as Sam Richardson was out there, it would always have a silent guardian watching over it, and that was enough for him. Chapter 20, Whispers of the Past. With the broker behind bars, the city seemed to sigh in relief. The news channels were buzzing with stories of her criminal empire's collapse and the end of a shadowy reign that had terrorized the streets for years. Sam Richardson became somewhat of a legend in the city's underworld and beyond. People began calling him the Watchman, the invisible force who protected the vulnerable and took down the powerful. But as the days turned into weeks, Sam found that the shadows had not entirely disappeared. There were still whispers, rumors of remnants from the broker's network trying to regroup. He knew that taking down the broker had not eradicated the problem, it had merely weakened it. And as long as those whispers existed, Sam would continue his work. One evening, as Sam walked his usual route through the dimly lit streets, a young woman named Kara approached him. She was new to the streets, her eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. She had heard stories of the man who helped the homeless and the lost, and she was desperate. "Mr. Richardson, I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "My brother, he's missing. I think he got caught up in something bad." Sam listened carefully, his instincts on high alert. She explained that her brother, a troubled young man named Danny, had recently fallen in with the wrong crowd. She feared he was being used as a pawn by those looking to reclaim the power vacuum left by the broker's downfall. Do you know where he might be? Sam asked, his mind already forming a plan. Kara nodded, her eyes welling with tears. There's a place, an old nightclub that shut down a few years ago. I heard they're using it as a base now. Please, Mr. Richardson, I don't know who else to turn to. Sam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't worry. I'll find him. Chapter 21, Into the Nest. The old nightclub Kara mentioned was on the outskirts of the city, hidden away in a neighborhood most people avoided after dark. The building was a hulking, dilapidated structure with boarded-up windows and faded neon signs that flickered weakly in the night. Sam knew this was the kind of place where desperate people found themselves caught in the crossfire between crime and survival. As he approached the building, Sam noticed several men standing guard at the entrance. He couldn't just walk in, so he circled around the back, looking for another way inside. He found a rusted fire escape that led up to a second-floor window. With the agility that belied his age, he climbed up and slipped inside. The interior was dark, the air thick with dust and a stench of mold. Sam could hear muffled voices coming from below. He crept toward the source of the noise, moving slowly to avoid detection. When he reached the balcony overlooking the main floor, he saw a group of men gathered around a table, discussing their next move. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head and a menacing presence, was giving orders. We need to hit back hard. They think we're finished, but we're just getting started. The city is ours for the taking. Sam scanned the room and spotted a young man sitting apart from the group, his hands bound and his face bruised. Danny. Sam's heart sank. The kid was in deeper than he'd thought. He needed to get him out, but he had to be smart about it. He waited until the group's attention shifted to a heated argument. Then, he moved quietly down the stairs and slipped into the shadows near Danny. He whispered, Danny, I'm here to help. Stay quiet, and we'll get you out of here. Danny's eyes widened in fear, but he nodded. Sam quickly cut the ropes binding Danny's hands and motioned for him to follow. They moved silently, staying low and out of sight, heading back toward the fire escape. Just as they reached it, one of the men turned and spotted them. Hey! Stop them! Chapter 22, The Escape. The room erupted into chaos. Sam pushed Danny ahead of him. Go! Climb down, now! As Danny scrambled down the fire escape, Sam turned to face the oncoming men. He wasn't armed, but he had years of street fighting and military experience on his side. He dodged the first swing and countered with a swift punch to the gut, sending one of the thugs to the floor. But more were coming, and Sam knew he couldn't take them all on. He grabbed a nearby metal pipe and swung it in a wide arc, forcing the men back just long enough for him to make his escape. He jumped onto the fire escape and slid down, his hands burning from the friction. He hit the ground running, Danny close behind. They darted through alleys and side streets, the sounds of pursuit fading as they put more distance between themselves and the nightclub. When they finally stopped, breathless and exhausted, Danny looked at Sam with a mixture of fear and awe. Why did you help me? Danny asked, his voice shaky. Sam gave a tired smile. Because everyone deserves a second chance, kid. Now let's get you back to your sister. Chapter 23, Confronting the Future. Back in the safety of a small, hidden safe house that Sam used occasionally, Danny was reunited with his sister, Kara. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face, grateful that Sam had brought her brother back alive. As they sat around a small table, Sam laid out what he had learned. Those guys are looking to rebuild what the broker lost. They're not as organized, but they're dangerous. And they're desperate. Kara's eyes widened. What can we do? We're just regular people. Sam shook his head. You're stronger than you think. And you're not alone. We need to keep shining a light on these shadows, make it so they have nowhere to hide. Danny, looking ashamed, spoke up. I'm sorry I got mixed up in this. I just wanted to find a way out, you know. Make some money, be somebody. Sam nodded. I get it. But there are better ways. I can help you, but you've got to be willing to help yourself first. Danny nodded, determination replacing the fear in his eyes. I will. I promise. Chapter 24, Building a New Path. With the immediate threat dealt with, Sam turned his attention to the bigger picture. He realized that the city's issues weren't just about crime, they were about people feeling abandoned, hopeless, and desperate. If he was going to make a real difference, he needed to address the root causes. He began working more closely with community organizations, advocating for better support for at-risk youth, more shelters for the homeless, and outreach programs that could give people the tools they needed to turn their lives around. The mayor, impressed by his dedication, helped secure funding for some of these initiatives. Sam also continued his work on the streets, but now with a broader mission. He wasn't just looking for the bad guys, he was looking for those who needed a hand, a word of encouragement, or just someone who believed in them. The city began to change, slowly but surely. People started to feel safer, more hopeful. Chapter 25, the final stand. Despite the progress, there were still those who wanted to return to the old ways, who thrived in chaos and darkness. They began to push back harder, targeting some of the new programs Sam had helped establish. One night, a shelter that had just opened was set on fire. No one was hurt, but the message was clear: the battle for the city wasn't over. Sam knew he had to take a stand. He gathered his allies, those he'd helped, those who believed in his vision for a better city, and even some former enemies who had seen the light. Together, they devised a plan to root out the remnants of the criminal networks once and for all. The final confrontation came at another old warehouse, the same one where Sam had first caught wind of the broker. This time, however, he wasn't alone. The people he had inspired were there with him. Danny, now a youth mentor, stood by his side, Kara, helping coordinate with community leaders, and even Daniel, who had left his comfortable job at City Hall to be on the ground with Sam. They moved in carefully, knowing this was their last shot to take down those who wanted to drag the city back into the shadows. The fight was intense, but they were prepared. With coordination, quick thinking, and sheer determination, they overwhelmed the criminals, breaking their power once and for all. Chapter 26, a city reborn. With the last of the major criminal networks dismantled, the city began to thrive. New businesses opened, neighborhoods were revitalized, and people who had once been afraid to walk the streets at night began to feel safe again. Sam became a respected figure in the community, not just as the watchman, but as a leader who had shown that one person, no matter how beaten down by life, could make a difference. The city held a special ceremony in his honor, and while Sam was never one for the spotlight, he accepted it with humility, knowing it wasn't just about him, it was about everyone who had fought alongside him for a better future. As he stood on the steps of City Hall, looking out over the crowd of faces, young and old, rich and poor, all filled with hope, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew his journey wasn't over, there would always be more work to do, more people to help. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like the city had truly become his home again. And with that, Sam Richardson, the homeless veteran who had once been forgotten by the world, walked down those steps with a purpose and a mission to continue fighting for those who needed him most, knowing that he had made his life, and his city, matter.